Hello, I will be presenting the strategies to reduce extraneous cognitive load. My name is Chambry Pei, or Bori. This course is EDU 734 with Dr. Abraham, and today is May 4th, 2025. There will be three learning objectives for this presentation. The first one is to identify sources of extraneous cognitive load. We will then evaluate the effectiveness of different strategies to reduce that extraneous cognitive load. And also, I would like to present the idea of how to develop a framework for cognitive load aware instruction. Now let's take a look at this screen right here. What do you think? Do you think that this is an effective PowerPoint for your students? If your students were watching this PowerPoint right now, what do you think they would say? Now take a look at the information on this screen. The information on this screen is the same as the previous screen. However, do you think that your students would rather see this information, or do you think that they would prefer the previous screen? I think that this will be the screen that the students will prefer. The information is the same. Now, granted, in the previous slide, it was definitions, and in this slide is key concepts. However, if you were able to see the information on the previous screen, you would know that the key concepts are the same. Now let's take a look at information processing. It's how your brain handles information. You receive information, whether from you as an educator giving the information to your students, and it's how they handle the information. We also handle the information that we receive from different aspects of our life. Now, how does our brain handle all that information? This is called extraneous cognitive load. It's that mental strain that we get from maybe if the students, like take for example the previous slide. Is it from that presentation style? It's not the content that is overloading your students. It may be the way you are presenting the content to your students, and this is extraneous cognitive load, and we will dive deeper into what this definition is about. But extraneous cognitive load can hinder a student's learning because the information is overloading their information processing system. The multimedia principles that we will go over, what that is the use of text, images, audio, video, to basically help in breaking up the text or the wording and to reduce overload. Now, I've mentioned that word cognitive load several times already, but before we understand what cognitive load is, we have to understand what the cognitive load theory is. This theory explains how the human brain handles information and also the need for it to manage different types of mental effort to improve learning. In short, it is to reduce unnecessary effort to improve brain learning. So how does our brain do that? The cognitive load theory helps us understand how people learn. If we give students too much information at once or make things too complicated, it becomes harder for them to learn. That's why it's important for you as educators to keep this in mind when planning lessons. It can really make a difference in how well students do. Now let's take a look at the cognitive load theory and the three concepts. The intrinsic load, this is the complexity of new information. This is how students receive and perceive information. The germane load is linking new information with current information. Remember that your students are different. They may have unique backgrounds or different experiences, or they may have different learning styles. The extraneous load, which is what we will focus on in this presentation, is the unnecessary and distracting information. When you look at this, what do you see or what are you focusing on? I believe some of you may have been able to read some of the words that are on the screen, such as on the top left corner there, simplifying instructions, or the top right, minimizing distractions. However, take another closer look at it. I'll give you a few seconds. Have you noticed that the spelling is incorrect? Why do you think that you were able to still figure out what the word is on this screen, or some of the words. Your brain is sometimes overloaded. This is called extraneous overload. There's a lot of information on the screen that maybe you are only focused on one part of the screen, but there's a lot. Therefore, you want to kind of take a look at it very closely and see what the distractions are, or why you were focusing on only one section at a time. Now let's take a look at some of the examples of extraneous cognitive load. Complex and confusing examples. Just like in the previous picture, as I go through the rest of the presentation, you may find that the examples that I provided were confusing or even complex. Irrelevant graphics or animation, just like the previous slide. Maybe some of you thought, well, this is irrelevant to the rest of the presentation, or the animation that you keep seeing from the transitions of the slides maybe is confusing to you. And also the unnecessary jargon or technical terms that are used. There may be terms that you have not defined for your students, or due to your scholarly experiences, you may not know or understand or realize that your students may not understand the terms. Therefore, you just continue with your presentation without elaborating on the definitions of some of the technical terms that you are trying to portray to your students. There are some categories of extraneous cognitive load that I want to go over. The first one is instructional design flaws. Some of us are educators, and some of us have 1 year of experience, some of us have over 20 years of experience. We know our content. However, are we designing our content to match what our students should be learning? There may be some instructional design flaws. Do you know who your audience are? Are your audience young students? Are they high school students? Are they college students? Or are they adults? So the way you design your instruction has to fit with your audience so that you can have the best outcomes for your students' learning. Poorly organized content. At the end of this presentation, you may say, Bori, your information was poorly organized and I did not understand the information, or you could have done this better, or you could have presented this information before that information. And this can cause you to not have good learning results when you feel like the content is poorly organized. Distractions in the learning environment. Some of you may hear things in the background from this presentation right here, and you say, I did not understand what she was saying because there were distractions in the background. So when you are creating your instruction, when you are designing your presentation, think of all these things so that your students have the best learning outcomes. This is an example of what an instructional design flaw looks like or could look like. I'll give you a few seconds to take a look at that information. As you can see, there is just too much information and it can be confusing for your students. Although this information may be very important, when you understand this information, because there is such an overload of information on this one image, your students may not grasp the whole concept of what you are trying to explain to them. Take this website for example. Isn't it confusing? How are your students able to find the information necessary if your website is something like this, where it is poorly organized and there is so much content on this website? Same for your assignments. If you are creating an assignment and there's just so much information or so many directions on your assignments that could cause confusion for your students, they may not be able to understand the assignment directions that you are trying to give them. Therefore, make sure that when you are creating your instruction, make sure that it is clear and simple for the students so that they can easily understand the information, or there is a way that the students can request for help very easily. As instructors, we have all been through distractions in the learning environment. The class may be disruptive, excited, You have students coming in and out of the class possibly, whether it be due to coming in tardy or whether they are going to the restroom. There are a lot of distractions in the classroom, or there could be a lot of distractions in the classroom. Therefore, you have to consider all of these distractions in your learning environment. The one main distractions that probably all classroom teachers are experiencing now are these cell phones. Instructors have cell phones, students have cell phones. This could be a major distraction. However, how can you use cell phones to benefit the students' learning instead of being a distraction for the students? Because distractions will hinder learning. How can we as instructors prevent them? Sure, we can lecture them all day or give them the assignments that take up the whole class period, but will this enhance the learning outcomes? To help prevent some of those distractions from happening, there are some strategies to reduce extraneous cognitive load and assist with the students' learning. Simplify the instructions. Make it easy for the students. Make it simple. Complicated instructions will not allow the students to understand what they are required of as far as for the assignment. Use relevant visuals. The visuals help. It helps break down the wording. When there's too many words, the students can have an overload of information, an overload of text. Therefore, the pictures help. And then also some students learn visually or able to see the information or able to understand the information in picture form. Avoid unnecessary information. Provide the students with the information that they need without all the extra information that you know will not help the students. We will now be diving into some studies from the literature to review their strategies for reducing extraneous cognitive load. Remember, clear cues reduce unnecessary cognitive load. And what is signaling? Signaling refers to the use of cues or markers that help guide a learner's attention to the most important information in the instructional materials. For example, highlighting, bolding, underlining, or the use of arrows. Verbal cues are also very helpful for the students. Things like you tell the students to pay attention to this part, or this is important because. Using headings, bullet points, or numbered lists to organize your content will help the students see the information clearly. The first example here is what we do not want to present to our students. There's just too much information on the first example. The bottom example here is a much better example if you are trying to provide the information to your students and also signal what is most important in this slide right here. Signaling does work. Signaling helps to reduce extraneous cognitive load. It directs attention to the relevant information that the students need. It makes it easier to organize and integrate new knowledge, and it also supports better retention and transfer of information. When the information is broken down or in bullet points, or important information is highlighted or underlined, the students are paying much more attention to those information, or they kind of have a visual of what the actual information looks like, and they can remember it that way. Therefore, signaling works. One of the research studies that we will be taking a look at is the one by Beach et al. It's about signaling and learning, where they studied 138 student participants who were studying the formation of tsunamis. The experimental design consisted of a 2x2 design where there is signaling, color cues versus no color cues. The cognitive load is fluid font versus disfluid font. The results from Beach et al. Are as follows. Signaling improved transfer performance. It helped the learners apply knowledge to new situations. The cognitive load was also reduced in the signaling condition. Font fluency or extraneous load, however, had no significant effect on the learning outcomes. Disfluent fonts increased the mental effort and the frustration. The implications from this study are signaling is a robust instructional aid, and it also supports the cognitive load theory. In conclusion, Beach and al. Found that the use of visual cues are effective in students' learning. Virtual reality is a new strategy in education. We will take a look at 2 studies that supports virtual reality in education. How does virtual reality reduce extraneous load? Immersive virtual reality removes the need for mental visualization. The students can actually see it and feel it. However, it is virtual reality. Integrated content reduces that split attention that students have. The 3D visuals also boost spatial understanding, and natural controls make the interaction intuitive and personal to the students. Although virtual reality is exciting and entertaining for students, it can also increase extraneous cognitive load if the interface is unintuitive or distracting, causing the students to not engage in the information that they are supposed to engage in, or if the environment includes unnecessary visual or auditory elements. Sometimes maybe the volume is too loud, or there's too much visual, and it overloads the students' cognitive ability to process the information that they need to process. And sometimes users are just unfamiliar with the virtual reality controls, and they may experience different types of motion sickness, or just is too much auditory elements along with that can cause them to get confused or not understand the information that they need to learn. To effectively reduce cognitive load, virtual reality assignments should be well aligned with the learning objectives. It should not be something just to entertain the students or something that you feel is interesting. It should align with what your learning objectives are for your students, what your learning goals are, what the assignment is about. Use clear guided interactions. Have the students understand what the instructions are so that they know what to do when they experience that virtual reality assignment. Avoid overloading their senses with irrelevant stimuli that they do not need, because that will be increasing the extraneous cognitive load. In the study by Albus and Seufert, they looked at managing mental effort in virtual reality. They explored how different modes of presenting information in virtual reality affect learning outcomes and cognitive load. They looked at 61 university students, and between subjects designed comparing visual only and audio-visual instructional formats in virtual reality. They found that visual only, the recall was better in visual only, the recall was worse in audio-visual, and in visual only, comprehension was much better than audio-visual. Transfer was also better in visual only instead of audio-visual. In conclusion, they found that there was no significant difference in the extraneous cognitive load. Another study about immersive virtual reality is Elm et al. Study. This study challenges the assumptions about multimedia learning in immersive environments and suggests that instructional design in virtual reality needs to be reconsidered. What works in traditional 2D environments may not translate directly to 3D immersive settings. So the participants include 79 undergraduate biology students. They completed a 10-minute written reflection after their virtual reality lesson. The control group rested after the virtual reality lesson, and the simulation lasted for about 45 minutes. Key findings from this study showed learner gains. All students showed a significant knowledge improvement. There was increased learner engagement and motivation, enhanced enhanced sense of presence, which leads to better knowledge retention, and also supported experiential active learning that the students were able to gain. Some implications is that VR is a promising tool. It is fairly a new method. However, it is a promising tool that educators should try or should use. It's interactive for the students, it's student-centered education, and it's also practical, especially in STEM and technical fields. Another strategy that we will take a look at is gamification. What is gamification? It's the use of game elements to motivate and engage learners. These are some common game elements in learning. Points or reward systems. These are different systems to where the students can gain for completing tasks or quizzes. Badges and achievements. It helps the students to know that they will receive something, and this also marks their milestones when they reach or when they complete a certain task. Leaderboards. It encourages competition, and quests and challenges that promotes problem solving. Why is gamification effective? It increases intrinsic motivation. Students are more motivated to compete. They may be motivated to gain a certificate or some type of reward after their completion of a task or assignment. It is a more intensive involvement. A lot of students may feel like they're playing instead of learning, even though they're learning while they're playing. It enriches the learning experience. It's interactive. It helps get the student standing up, moving around, and doing practical applications that can help them learn in the long run. And it also increases the learning efficiency. Although gamification can transform passive learning into an engaging, interactive experience, there are some effects of this strategy. There are some considerations that needs to be considered or looked at. Overuse may lead to extrinsic motivation only. They may only want the reward and not the experience of learning. It needs to be well aligned with the learning goals. Instructors cannot just have students play all the time, so there should be a learning factor along with those learning goals. Not all learners respond equally to competitive elements. There are some students who do not want to engage in those activities. Therefore, you have to consider all students when you are designing instruction. To explore this strategy to reduce extraneous cognitive load better, we've looked at a study from Chen and al. This is about the gamified flipped classroom model. The researchers wanted to explore how gamification affects foreign language anxiety and also cognitive load in a university level English as a foreign language classroom. It's conducted in a Chinese university. They use a gamified flipped classroom model. Data was collected through 5 surveys, 3 semi-structured interviews, and 15 in-class observations. The key findings in this study show that there was no significant change in overall anxiety or cognitive load. There were mixed effects. There was some communication apprehension, there was fear of negative evaluation, and also there was some lack of self-confidence. The implications that the researchers recommend is to balance game elements to improve learning outcomes. However, more research is needed in immersive virtual reality. Proven multimedia methods. An excellent textbook to take a look at is the textbook by Clark and Meyer. The purpose of the book is to provide evidence-based guidelines. It's based on the cognitive theory, and the outcome from this book on multimedia methods showed that there's improved engagement, retention, and learning transfer. Multimedia. What is the definition of multimedia? It is the combination of text, graphics, sound, animations, and videos that is delivered interactively, much like this presentation right here. As you can see, I have used several different methods such as animations, also transitions, and also this video format. Take a look at the examples of multimedia and e-learning on the left. Instructors can use interactive websites, online videos, television, video games, and more. These are just some examples. As instructors, be creative with your instructional design. And again, remember your audience, keep your audience in mind, and also use strategies that can reduce extraneous cognitive load for your students. Make sure that it is engaging and also easier to understand. Some practical guidelines to use your multimedia effectively. Use relevant visuals to support students' learning. Avoid any type of distracting graphics or sounds that may cause extraneous cognitive load. Present spoken words with visuals, not all written text. And also keep your text near the corresponding images. The goal of your strategies to reduce cognitive load is also to enhance engagement in your students. Some of the ones that we have mentioned earlier in this presentation was virtual reality, signaling, and gamification. These can help your students' ability to learn. You can also use interactive elements as used in this presentation today. Use different types of scenarios, sometimes a story. Telling a story, the students may understand it because they may have experience with that story, or they understand it just based on the scene that you are displaying or going over. And also giving the students immediate feedback helps them to understand whether they are understanding the information correctly or whether they need more help with that assignment. And also make it personal for the students. The students are all different, and make sure that the learning is personalized for each student. Granted, you do not have to make instruction individually for each student, but make sure that you understand who your audience are and have different types of learning techniques for your students, or different types of instruction for your students depending on what their learning abilities are. How to reduce extraneous cognitive load. Make sure that you use clear, concise language. Eliminate any type of unnecessary graphics or sounds. Align text with the images so that the students can relate the text to the image that is being presented. Avoid redundancy. Segment content. This is an example of segmenting your content. Use consistent layouts and also provide advanced organizers if possible. Future trends in learning. So we've talked about virtual reality, and we also talked about gamification. However, there is more to learn about these two strategies. There's also artificial intelligence that is very popular right now, and there is learning analytics, blockchain technology, and also the metaverse classrooms. So these are some future trends that need to be explored by instructors and instructional designers. This may help as far as making sure that the students are up to date with the information, and also making sure that we as instructors are keeping up with what the students are gaining in the real world and also what they are experiencing. So the more updated that we are on our technology learning, the more that we can help our students. As educators, we all have challenges. And some of these challenges include high cognitive load. As instructors, when we design our lessons, we have to remember to make sure that we keep our audience in mind, who our audience is, so that we can create lesson plans that are consistent with the learning goals of that audience. If not, they will be experiencing high cognitive load. We may understand the information, but we have to remember that the students may not have been exposed to this information yet. Low engagement. The students, we may believe that our lesson plan is 100% great. However, the students are not engaged in the lesson, and sometimes this causes low confidence or frustration in what we put out for the students. There are some technology barriers. For example, in our district, all students receive a device, a student device. And because every student it may be on the device at the same time, this causes some technology issues when we are completing assignments or when we are testing. Diverse learning needs, we have to remember that our students are different and that some students may need extra help, or some students may need a different kind of help, and we have to adapt to their learning and make sure that we are presenting information or have different types of information that could help all types of students. And also there are assessment gaps. There are just some students or people in general that do not test well, and therefore we have to continue assessing our students and providing feedback. Immediate feedback will help the students understand and also will help them figure out how they can learn better or become a better learner. Some solutions to those challenges can include simplifying the content. As we mentioned earlier, this reduces extraneous cognitive load in the students. Incorporating interactive designs like the gamification or the virtual reality increases engagement from your students. Tech support, if tech support is needed. Technology is where the world is moving towards. Therefore, if we keep up to date with the technology or forward thinking, that will help the students as well, because they are forward thinking and they continue to receive and learn technology on a daily basis. Therefore, we have to maintain or keep ahead of the students so that we can help them. Also, help the students to adapt to differentiated instruction, because again, the students are all different. Therefore, if you have differentiated instruction, that will help the different types of students' learning abilities. And also make sure that the assessments are authentic. The assessments is related to what you have taught the students, or related to the instructional goals that you have, or the learning goals that you intended for the students to learn. In summary, remove irrelevant content, use clear, concise language, align your text with visuals, avoid redundancy, segment the information, use consistent layouts, provide advanced organizers, and minimize split attention. Some takeaways and some things that we can expect as instructors are hyper-personalized learning experience. There may be greater learning autonomy through smart systems, and there are blended and hybrid models that are becoming more of the norm in learning. And also there's an increased focus on digital well-being and ethics. Therefore, we have to continue professionalism and taking professional development courses in order to keep current on the trends for learning and for education. Any questions that you may have, or anything that you can add to this presentation? These are the references. Some of my closing remarks: extraneous cognitive load hinders learning by overloading the working memory. Clear, focused design improves comprehension and retention. Visual and verbal alignment is key to effective instruction. And design with purpose. Every element should support learning, not distract students from it. Stay adaptable. Embrace innovation, which helps meet the learner's needs. And my final thought: intentional design reduces mental clutter, and it also enhances real-world learning impact. I appreciate your time and support. Thank you very much.